We are now broadcasting. We have now broadcasting. It only took us like 3 or 4 tries to get this thing up and running, but we finally got it up and running. How's it going, everybody? My name is Rick C. I am the incredibly unattractive person who you are staring at. I will soon be joined by Mr. Jonathan, whose last name I don't have. Jonathan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Outstanding, outstanding. So the glitch that I found was that I was using Google Chrome as opposed to the native browser, which was Safari, which gave me which would give me all kind of error messages. When I went over to Safari, everything came right up.
Wow.
So that's kind of where I am right now. We're gonna stand by for only a few minutes while Mr. Will joins us. Hopefully he's able to join us pretty soon. Jonathan, I gotta tell you, I'm looking at the photo you have here, and I am still jealous of how professional and you look like a model for Hair Club for Men here. I'm telling you.
Hair Club for Men.
You like an after shot from Hair Club for Men.
Oh Jesus.
Okay. Hey, Will, how you doing? Thank you for joining us. Can you hear us? I'm not sure if Will can hear us. Okay, here you go. Did you were you able to get the link on your tablet?
I'm trying to get it back. Hold on.
Okay. While you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and throw a pitch. Jonathan, do you want to go ahead and get us started while he's getting set up?
All right. So we will kick off in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Classic Black. Wow, forgot the name of the show that quickly. Let's try it again.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Repitch.
All right, that was a foul ball that did not count. Soncerae edit all this out if you can hear us. No, but hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Classic Black Man, where tonight we will be discussing how fathers raise their sons differently than daughters.
Okay, I'll take that for $1. With us today, we have Mr. Jonathan and Will, as well as yours truly, Mr. Rick C. First question I'd like to throw out, unless Jonathan wants to chime in on this. What are some? We all know that it's historically known that men have been protectors, men have been the providers, and women would be the homemakers. In our current cultural climate, do we believe that? I'll pose it out to both of you guys. Do we believe that culture has changed, is changing, or should change?
I'll go first on that. I really believe that it has changed and is continuing to change. But I think people are becoming more and more aware that that is the case, and I think that we need to do something about it, to kind of put our roles back in order, so to speak.
I can definitely acknowledge that it is changing, where you see more stay-at-home fathers and things like that, and the wife mother has become the major provider, sometimes the sole provider for the household finances. But interestingly enough, I know a lot of times when we look at the Bible or just older things like that, we always see it as, like you said, women being the nurturers, men being the providers. But interestingly enough, though, there was a time where even, I guess you'd say, finances, money didn't exist. People operated on a bartering system. So I guess by providing, it wasn't always even money. But I look at the term provider as just all around, caregiver for the household, making sure that your wife and children are okay. But I have to add that nurturing piece into the subset as well. You can't just take the father out of the responsibility when it comes to developing those mindsets.
I can agree with that. I will say that it is changing because we have individuals, we have individual because our social bubbles or our acceptance bubbles or our information bubbles are shrinking so small. If it's not something that has already been introduced to us, it's not something that we're going to generally accept. What I mean by that is if you were raised to believe that you have to depend upon yourself, it's very difficult to try and accept someone new when you honestly believe that you can't trust it, you can't trust. Or in contrast, if you believe that you have to have someone with you, then that's what you will go after. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to try to change that preset mindset.
Yeah, absolutely.
The
I
same.
think
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Will.
I think too, the roles are I think there's a trend or a tendency to go back to the way things were. Like, a few years ago, women were talking about, they, being independent and they can do bad by themselves and stuff like that. But now what I'm hearing more of is women are tired of doing everything by themselves. Now they're looking for men to come in and take charge. They don't even want to make the decisions anymore. They're just tired. So you don't hear that same, you know, those same comments coming from women talking about they can do it by themselves anymore. They want someone to come in and take charge.
Okay.
But I think what's interesting with the whole topic that we talked about tonight about how children are raised, I think a lot of parents, especially, I don't, depending on the races, this probably does vary. But in Black homes, I would, go on record to say that I think Black young girls are raised to kind of build a plan without a man being in the picture sometimes. There are a lot of young ladies who have said, okay, my father taught me or my mother taught me, don't depend on a man for anything. Have your own money, have your own place, have your own this, have your own that. And I think that sometimes that may come from bad past experiences that the parent had. So I don't want to see you in a situation where you have no money to your name because you thought that a man was going to take care of you, ended up not working out, and now you don't have a pot to piss in. So I think when it comes to how daughters are being raised, I think that the fathers are, and the mothers too, but the fathers are kind of building them up independently so that they don't need that man at all. When it comes to, I guess you'd say, fathers with their sons, it's an interesting thing. I think, that's going to vary per household, but just overall, I think that the fathers should do a better job of teaching them about the importance of courting and friendship. I don't know if a lot of fathers talk to their sons about being friends with a woman before he gets into a romantic relationship with her. So, I'm curious to see what y'all think about that.
As probably the only person on the chat right now who is a father, I can tell you that is a very difficult conversation to have, not because of the nature, but because of the way that my son's mind develops. Looking back, I dare say it's very few men that once they reach that level of maturity can look at a young lady as someone that can honestly be their friend, as opposed to someone that could be exploited sexually. They look at these young ladies and they think, wow, this is an incredibly beautiful woman. I want to have her. I want her. The idea of friendship is something that comes along later, and that carries on into a preteen, teen, and ultimately into adulthood. I agree with you that that is a skill that's not taught, but I also say that that is a lesson that has, I don't want to say died, but has kind of been stifled through the generations.
Well, it's interesting. I was just on a relationship talk show the other day, and we were talking about that very thing. I'm looking at it from a standpoint of being a single man with no kids and dating single mothers with kids. Um, and a lot of times, what happens is, the mothers are trying to protect their children, not trying to bring, any kind of man around them all the time. But this is the problem. You know, if the kids don't see any healthy adult interaction, then the only thing that you're teaching that child to do is to be single. You know, they don't, you know, we don't come out, men don't come out the womb knowing how to date, of course. And then in most cases, we're not raised in a functional family where we see healthy adult relationships. So where do we learn? Lesson ends up being taught, you know, through, if not the media, you know, reality television or things like that. Um, we learn it by trial and error, going on dates. And if you don't encounter a woman that understands, you know, this man doesn't know, and maybe I just need to take a moment and say, hey, this is what I like, then we're not going to know, you know. And the way dating is today, most people don't take the time out to learn one another or to show each other likes and dislikes are. So it becomes trial and error.
I think maybe we're kind of slipping off topic here. So let me try and shift the conversation this way. What would you teach your daughter that you would not teach your son, and vice versa?
That's a good question. I don't know. My mind is actually a little bit different. So this may not, and I wouldn't say it's popular, but for me, I actually have to teach my son how to be more vulnerable. I know that a lot of times when we look at stereotypes of how a man should act versus how a woman should act, a woman who is, you know, emotional, no one really thinks anything of it. Let's say boyfriend breaks up with her. She wants to spend a month crying, eating ice cream. It would just be in most people's minds, a standard breakup, and that's how she acts. You take that same exact situation, except the woman left the man. You see him at home for a month crying, eating ice cream, and everybody's going to go smack him upside the head talking about what's wrong with you. So how did we get to the place where she can do it? He can't do it though. So a lot of times, you know, as men, we're always raised to have a mask on. Don't show emotion, don't show fear, don't show sadness. You know, get up, put your pants on, keep doing what you got to do, regardless of whatever is going on around you. So after a while, that's how those anger issues get built up. That's how that inability to communicate and express emotion when something goes wrong builds up, and just all of those issues that makes it really hard for you to be in a relationship with a woman. I have to kind of teach my son that you need to show her that you have bad days. And, you know, if she does see you cry, how does that go? Whereas with my daughter, the way that our society is set up right now, there are a lot of things that I'm not happy with. For example, women make less money than men do in corporate America. So how is it that the guy in the cubicle next to you or the office next to you makes another $25,000, but you all have the same job title? And how to handle that conversation and those types of just situations altogether.
I can see that. I could definitely understand. I can agree with that. But I think we kind of hit the nail on the head when it comes to emotional health. Is there any women historically, and of course I'm speaking from my knowledge here, have been taught from a very early age how to deal with their emotional health? What is the appropriate age where you would teach a young man how to deal with his emotional health? Because that's one lesson that I know for my son, that's something that I've neglected because that's not something I'm really familiar with. I'm more familiar with how to show him how to do things with his hands, do things with his mind, how to figure things out, how to understand, how to negotiate, how to build for himself. But as far as building, or as far as giving him the tools to negotiate his psyche, so that way when he can present himself to a woman as a fully developed man, that's not something that I can look back upon and say that this is what you need to do. It's something I've had to figure out. And even in there, the only reason I learned that was because I had to stumble along the way. So my question to the group would be, at what age or at what is your metric to teach lessons such as that? Because historically, as I said, women get those lessons they get those lessons openly, and right when they start to learn to talk, they have those lessons. When do men get those lessons?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm thinking probably for me, I would say maybe 8 or 9. Reason being, at around 8 or 9 years old, you're eligible to join sports teams. Like pretty much when you're in situations where the chances of being bullied, the chances of being rejected from something, whether it's a friendship, a team, or something where sadness does come up, you need to know how to handle those types of things. So, for example, little Billy tries out for Little League and doesn't make the cut. With smaller groups like 5 and 6, they're picking everybody. But when it gets older, it starts to get a little bit more competitive. So that's when, the lines get drawn in the sand. So for me, I'd say 8 or 9 is when I'd start having that conversation with my son about his mental psyche.
I think for me, I don't know if there's a specific age that you can say. I know there are different lessons that little boys need to learn at different stages of their childhood. Like, when they're little, you definitely want to have them interact with other little boys of different races and cultures. Teach them, simple lessons like sharing and things of that nature. That goes a lot into the mental health. It begins to teach them acceptance and having a giving nature. I have a nephew that's 14 now, and I'm very active in his life, and he lives in Nashville, Tennessee. So most of his friends are white, and at first it was fine. They were growing up. Kids are innocent, when they're very young. But as he became a teenager, they started treating him differently. I guess they were picking up, the habits of their parents, and he really started understanding what it was to be a little black boy, in a white man's world, or a white neighborhood at least. And it was kind of a culture shock. So then we started to have the conversations about, how the world really is. And this happened around 8 or 9, Jonathan. So I think you're right in terms of that age being an age where it's time to start having more serious conversations. You don't want to wait until they get into their mid to late teens, because they're already out there experiencing, world. Basically, they're a man about to go out into the world on their own. And another thing too, a lot of times, especially single mothers, they don't start teaching their kids responsibility, or to initiate, responsibility on their own, until they get to be 15 or 16. And I'm saying at that age, it's almost too late, because they only have 2 years before they have to be out of the house. And now you're trying to make them accountable, you know, for their actions, when that needs to start at a much earlier age.
Something interesting too that I wanted to share, because it's actually something that I do. I'm a planner by nature, so everything that I do, I try to write it out. It's in a notebook somewhere, 5-year plans, 10-year plans. And I've always been made fun of for being that way. But what made it even worse is last year I shared something with some of my friends, and everybody found it so hilarious. Like, wow, why would you even sit down and do that? But I think it's really helpful. But basically, I made a list of the 20 objectives, I guess you would say. Maybe not 20, probably like 12 to 15 objectives that I want my kid to either know, master, or be exposed to at least by the time they're 18 years old. Now, I don't have any kids at all yet. So I guess you would say it's almost like a lesson plan. And the reason people found it funny is because it's like, well, you can't assume your kid is going to act like this. But the goal is not for my kid to exactly be everything on that list. The goal is to at least either, again, have the conversation and expose them to it, with the hopes that they will kind of take it and run with it. So, for example, one of the things on the list is a sense of community obligation. Don't be one of those people who see somebody throw something on the trash and you walk by it because it wasn't your trash. I don't think it's anything wrong with having a plan for your kids in terms of the life lessons you want them to kind of know. So I'll give you an example. Growing up, my mom is always like, with my brother and I, she was like, I wish that I had made y'all like clean up a little bit more around the house. But my brother used to have really bad allergies to certain detergents and bleaches and stuff. So she always used to like send us away to our grandmom's and she would clean. So nowadays, like if something is out of order or whatever, she's like, I blame myself for not imparting that in y'all at a young age. So it was interesting that people made fun of me for kind of correcting my own behavior and thinking of what objectives would you want your child to know before he even gets here? Not like when I have a child, I want him to be a ball player. I mean, like real personality type thing. I want him to be someone who has respect for women. I want him to be someone who has a strong faith base. I want him to be somebody who cares about his nutrition, you know?
I definitely understand that, and I can agree with you. But going back to when I look at my childhood, I can remember times when my mother, who was a single mother, there were things that she would expose me to that she would literally hide from my little sister, and vice versa. One of the things that she would kind of push on me was she wanted me to know how to do things with my hands. She wanted me to know how to change a tire, how to pull a transmission, how to pull a radio, how to fix a car, how to be able to get from point A to point B, all without having to ask for help. I guess I picked up from her that when you have to ask for help, that means you can't do it on your own. And as long as you can do it on your own, you don't need to ask for help. The exact opposite lesson was bestowed upon my sister, where you need to ask for help, even if you know you can do it. Ask for help and be denied first, then move forward. In your opinion, do you think that lesson was wrong, or do you think it was misguided? What are your thoughts?
It depends on how I'm sorry, not how, but why she said it like that. You know, it's one of those things like, okay, was she coming off as, I don't want you to come off to men as somebody who doesn't need them, thus they don't talk to you.
Jonathan, your microphone's going in and out again.
Oh, no. Basically, what I was saying is it depends on why your mom said it to your sister that way. Was she saying it in a way to not scare men off? Don't come off as somebody who doesn't need anybody. That way, if you do that, that'll scare away men. You'll never get dates. You'll never find a husband.
Yeah,
Well,
it's funny. My mom was that was one of her pet peeves too, Rick. When I was little, she didn't want me to ever have to depend on a woman for anything. So, give an example. When I was 9 years old, I came in the house. You know, Mom would always have the dinner on the stove, and this was during a time where we actually went outside and played. but
mm-hmm.
I remember one day coming in, and there was no food on the stove, and she was back in her bedroom on the phone. And so I went to her, and I said, Mom, what's for dinner? And she looked at me and she said, can you see over the stove? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, can you read? Yes, ma'am. She said, well, go in there and fix you something to eat then. And my jaw just kind of dropped to the floor. She said, don't worry, if you have any questions, I'll be right here. And from that point on, she stopped cooking, period. So my brother and I, we had to learn how to cook and fend for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a mistake to teach a man not to seek help when he needs it, because I think that's part of the problem of a lot of men today that are struggling, that they actually need to reach out and seek help, and they don't, because we're taught to be strong and having to pull ourselves up by ourselves. And I think that's it, that wealthy people, you cannot become successful or wealthy without the help of others. It's just not going to happen. I agree that you need to be a man and handle things, but there is a time where you need to be able to see that you need some help with your situation and reach out.
Most definitely. There's an expression I live by. I don't really know where I heard it or who said it, but they say that need is not bad. Need is need, meaning that a lot of times we associate, again, needing help with some type of deficiency. But I mean, if you look past that, somebody needs help, regardless of how they got in that situation, how long they've been in that situation, or what they need your help with. They need something. Let's put all that other stuff aside and just assist them. But on the other side, the guys have to be more comfortable speaking up, and they got to stop feeling ashamed and understand that we all have deficiencies. Some of y'all, like, I have terrible penmanship. It doesn't make me a bad person to say, hey, show me this or show me that. You have to look past that. I tell my guys that all the time. I work at a college, and there are plenty of guys here who are failing certain classes and won't say, hey, I need help in math. I went to school for math. So it's just one of those things where I always tell them, you never know, even within your own circle, who can help you with these variety of issues that you might have, but you have to speak up. You have to. It's the first step to actually getting the help that you need.
Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead. Did I cut you off?
No. I was done.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say I can attest to that. I have a problem with that as well. One of my biggest problems is asking for help because I feel the very first answer is going to be no. Um, we were having problems with the live stream earlier. I put it out there. Hey, does anybody else know how to do this? Because I'm having a really hard time. That's uncommon for me. When there's a problem that you have, and I really wonder if women have this as well, where you're told you have to be a man, or women told you have to be a woman and stand up on your own. The whole idea of being your own person that doesn't need anyone has become so, I don't want so ingrained, but has been pushed to such a degree. That rhetoric has been pushed to such a degree that the lessons that our children are learning today are to be more separate than we ever could be together.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a problem within our culture as well, where we shame people that reach out for help, and almost as if there's something wrong with you, that you can't figure out to resolve this problem on your own. That's not good. That's not healthy. That's a big problem, um, because it's not, like you said, Jonathan. Is not well. It shouldn't be a bad thing for someone to reach out just because you have certain types of deficiencies. We're strong in some areas and weak in others, and I think that also contributes to our relationships and not being able to build relationships with one another, because we just don't teach that, with our kids. We don't teach that. We don't teach them, and that's why I love the game of football, because you learn all of those lessons in that sport. Man, you learn how to work together. You learn how to depend on each other. You learn how to be accountable. You learn how to be tough. Um, you learn the importance of brotherhood and working, in organizational skills. It's a beautiful sport in teaching and raising young black men, a young man, period.
But how would you take the skills from that sport and translate those to a daughter? So I have a son, and as I said before, the trials and tribulations I put him through to shape and mold him so that he would have the strength and the tools he needs to succeed in a world without me, or in a world after I'm gone, would be drastically different if he were my daughter. So when you use football as a metaphor, or is it a metaphor or a simile? I think yeah, it was a metaphor. How would
Yeah.
you how would you translate those skills to a daughter?
I really think daughters need to learn womanhood from their mother. Men can't teach them womanhood. We can teach young boys how to be men. We can't teach young girls how to be women.
That's why one of my goals, actually, believe it or not, when I actually want a daughter compared to a son. If I could choose, pick your gender, I think that I would do better with, but regardless of which gender child I have, I actually want activity, and one activity where it's a lot of organization that goes into it. So, for example, whether that's competitive dance, competitive football, marching band, something where they have to compete, because I want them to learn about the value of winning, losing, humbly, respect, teamwork, those types of things. But then something like an honor society or a yearbook where you have to work together to get the group's opinions. You learn the importance of compromise and things like that. And I feel like those are examples of what both gender children can learn from. So that I guess you could say that's in my little notebook too. But outside of that, like you mentioned, how does football or the lessons learned in football translate to if you had a daughter? I think that the major things you get out of football, again, you get discipline, you get learning how to submit to a coach's authority, you learn teamwork, you learn winning, losing isn't everything. It's how you play the game. There are other activities out there that can give your daughter the same thing, even if it's not football.